All right, let's kick off this deep dive. We got a request to take a closer look at this YouTube video. Why is it always hard at the beginning?
Mm.
It's from that Learn English podcast channel, and I know a lot of us are curious about, well, why new beginnings can feel so darn challenging.
Yeah, that feeling is definitely something we can all relate to, right? Like no matter what you're trying to start, there's always that bit of a hurdle at the very beginning.
For sure. And, the video makes this interesting comparison saying it's kind of like driving down a road you've never been on. Makes sense. Your brain's going a mile a minute, trying to figure out all this new information and make decisions as you go. It really makes you wonder why our brains are wired that way.
Well, if you think about it from like an evolutionary standpoint, anything unfamiliar was often a sign of danger,
Hmm.
right? So our brains developed this kind of heightened alertness, a way to protect us. And in a way, that primal response is kind of still there, even if the new thing is just, learning a new language or starting a hobby.
Ah, so that's the reason. That makes a lot of sense. And the video also brought up this point about the difficulty actually being a chance to grow.
It's like working out a muscle.
Mm.
You push past your comfort zone, and it creates that bit of, I guess you could call it good stress, that forces our brains to adapt and create new connections. And the more we embrace those challenges, the tougher and more adaptable we become.
So it's not about avoiding that initial struggle. It's more like seeing it as a sign that, hey, we're on the right path and actually expanding what we're capable of.
Exactly. But, one thing that trips people up, especially right at the start, is having these, like, unrealistic expectations.
Oh, for sure. The video talks about learning English, which can feel super overwhelming if you expect to be fluent, like overnight.
Uh-huh. Yeah, like trying to climb Mount Everest in flip-flops. You need the right gear, the right training, and you got to be realistic about the time and effort it takes.
So how do we go about setting those realistic expectations? I feel like that's where a lot of people get stuck. They get pumped about something new, dive in head first, but then fizzle out quickly because they don't see results right away.
Well, one key takeaway from the video is the importance of patience and making progress gradually. It's all about breaking down those big, audacious goals into smaller, manageable steps. Instead of aiming for fluency right off the bat, what if you focused on, say, learning 5 new words every day or having a quick chat with a language partner once a week?
That sounds much more doable, and I think those smaller wins are super important for keeping the momentum going, especially when things start to feel tough.
Absolutely. Each win, no matter how small, reinforces that belief that you're making progress. And that feeling of accomplishment fuels your drive to keep pushing forward.
The video also talks about building habits, which seems to be a common thread when it comes to making any kind of lasting change, wouldn't you say?
Oh, totally. Think about it. Most of what we do every day is driven by habits, right? Brushing our teeth, making coffee, scrolling through our phones. We just do those things almost automatically without really thinking about it. That's the power of habits.
So the idea is to make this new thing, this new beginning, a part of that daily routine.
Exactly. The video suggests connecting this new activity to something you already do consistently. They call it habit stacking. Like, let's say you always have a cup of tea in the morning. What if you committed to, I don't know, practicing English for 10 minutes right after you finish your tea?
That's a really clever trick. By linking it to something you already do, you're basically using those existing pathways in your brain.
Right. You're using the power of your current habits to make this new thing feel more automatic and less effortful.
Makes sense. Now, the video also talks about having a support system when you're starting something new. In your experience, how important is that?
It's super important. Having people who get what you're going through, whether it's family, friends, a mentor, or even an online community, it can make a huge difference. They can offer encouragement, keep you accountable, and sometimes even create a bit of friendly competition to keep you motivated.
I totally agree. Even sharing those small wins with others makes the whole process so much more fun and less daunting.
Definitely. And on the flip side, having someone to talk to when you hit a snag can help you reframe those challenges, brainstorm solutions, and stay positive.
That's a great point, and it actually leads perfectly into our next topic, which is all about embracing failure.
Oh yeah, that dreaded F word. But the video actually makes a really good point. Failure isn't the opposite of success. It's a crucial part of learning.
I love the analogy they use about babies learning to walk. They fall over and over before they finally get it right. And each stumble, each fall, is actually giving them valuable information that helps them adjust and eventually succeed.
It's like a feedback loop. You try, you trip up, you figure out what went wrong, you tweak things and try again. And with each try, you get a little closer to your goal.
Reframing failure as a learning opportunity is so important, but I think it's also one of the hardest things to actually do. We're so used to avoiding failure, seeing it as a weakness or something.
Absolutely. Our culture often fixates on the end result, the success stories, without acknowledging well, the messy process that leads to those achievements. But the truth is, anyone who's really good at something has stumbled and failed along the way.
They use J.K. Rowling as an example. She got rejected tons of times before finding a publisher for Harry Potter. Imagine if she'd given up after the first or even the 10th rejection.
The world would be a much less magical place, that's for sure. It really shows that persistence and believing in yourself, even when things get tough, can lead to incredible things.
That's a really inspiring message, especially for anyone feeling overwhelmed or discouraged at the beginning of something new.
Absolutely. The key is to shift our thinking from being afraid of failure to seeing it as a necessary part of growing.
Well said. But even with all the best intentions and strategies, staying motivated over time can be a real struggle. What are some of the tips the video offers to keep that inner fire burning?
One powerful suggestion is to regularly reconnect with your why, that initial spark that made you start this journey. Why did you want to, let's say, learn English in the first place? What dreams, passions, or goals are driving you?
It's like revisiting that first moment of inspiration, that feeling of purpose that made you want to learn English or pursue whatever new beginning you're exploring.
Exactly. It's so easy to get caught up in the day-to-day and lose sight of the bigger picture. But reminding ourselves of our why can rekindle that excitement and give us the energy to push through tough spots.
The video also suggests that instead of just focusing on how quickly we can advance, we should actively look for inspiration along the way.
Absolutely. What parts of learning English, for example, do you genuinely enjoy? Is it finding new words, connecting with people from different cultures, or maybe that feeling of accomplishment after you nail a difficult grammar concept?
I love that shift in focus. It's about savoring the process, finding the joy in it, rather than just fixating on the end goal.
Precisely. And when we focus on the things that bring us joy, we're more likely to stay engaged, motivated, and committed for the long run.
That's a great point, and I think it's a good spot for us to wrap up this part of our deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from the reasons why new beginnings are tough to the importance of realistic expectations, building habits, having support systems, embracing those stumbles, and keeping ourselves motivated.
And in the next part of our chat, we're going to delve into some more specific strategies for making those first steps a little less intimidating and a lot more doable. So stay tuned.
All right, welcome back. I'm excited to dig into those specific strategies we talked about, the ones that can make starting something new feel less overwhelming and more like step by step. So where should we begin?
Well, the video makes a really strong case for setting clear, specific goals. It's not enough to just say, hey, I want to learn English or I want to get in shape.
Yeah.
We got to give our brains a roadmap, not just a vague destination.
Yeah, I get that. It's like trying to plan a road trip without an address, right? You might end up somewhere interesting, but chances are it won't be where you actually wanted to go.
Exactly. So the video suggests we take those big goals and break them down into smaller, more manageable milestones. Instead of, I want to learn English, it becomes, say, this week I'm going to master 5 new English verbs.
I like that. Sounds much less intimidating, right? Plus, checking those smaller goals off your list can give you that sense of accomplishment, that little boost to keep going, especially when you're just starting out.
And what's interesting is the video really stresses actually writing down those goals. It's not just about thinking about them. It's about getting them out of your head and making them real, something you can see.
It's almost like you're making a promise to yourself, isn't it? Writing it down makes that commitment feel more solid than just thinking about it.
For sure. And it also gives you a way to track your progress, which can be super motivating. When you're feeling discouraged, you can look back and see how far you've already come.
Now, we touched on the importance of good habits in the last part, but I think it deserves a bit more attention. The video really hammers home that routines are essential for making any new behavior stick. Why do you think that is?
Well, you gotta remember, our brains are wired for efficiency. Habits let us do things without using a ton of mental energy. Take driving, for instance. When you were first learning, it took all your focus, right? But now you can probably drive to work without even really thinking about it.
It's because that whole sequence of actions has become a habit, so your brain's free to think about other things. So how do we apply that to starting something new?
It's about intentionally weaving that new activity into our day, just like we do with brushing our teeth or having that first cup of coffee. The video even mentions this cool technique called habit stacking.
I remember that. Can you remind me how it works again?
Sure thing. It's all about linking the new habit to one you already have. Let's say you're already in the habit of taking a walk every morning. What if, during that walk, you listen to an English podcast?
So you're using that existing habit as a cue to trigger the new behavior. It's like hopping on a train that's already leaving the station.
Exactly.
Eh,
And over time, that new behavior becomes part of your routine. It takes less and less conscious effort.
That makes a lot of sense. And we also talked about getting support from others when starting something new. How can we find the right kind of support? And what role does it play in helping us succeed?
The video really highlights the power of like a shared purpose and accountability. Having people who get it, whether it's a friend, family member, a mentor, or even an online community, can make a world of difference. Sharing your journey with folks who understand those ups and downs can be huge,
Yeah, for me, having someone to celebrate those small wins with makes the whole thing more enjoyable and motivating.
for sure. And when you hit a roadblock, having someone there to offer encouragement and a different perspective can help you work through it without losing steam.
It's like having a co-pilot on a long flight. You can share the responsibility, navigate the tough parts together, and keep each other going. But even with the best co-pilot, there are going to be times when you hit some turbulence, right? And that brings us back to embracing failure.
Exactly. The video does a fantastic job of reframing failure, not as a sign of defeat, but as a necessary part of learning. They bring up that great analogy of babies learning to walk, how they stumble and fall over and over before they finally get it.
It's a good reminder that setbacks are going to happen, especially when you're pushing yourself outside your comfort zone and trying something new.
What matters, like the video says, is how we react to those setbacks. Do we let them stop us in our tracks, or do we see them as chances to learn?
So it's about changing our mindset from "I messed up" to "what can I learn from this?"
Exactly. The video suggests asking yourself some key questions. What went wrong? How can I adjust my approach? What new things can I try? By analyzing those quote-unquote failures, we gain valuable insights that help us refine our approach and ultimately become more effective.
That's such a powerful way to look at it, but it's one thing to understand it intellectually and a whole other thing to actually put it into practice when you're feeling down or frustrated.
Oh, absolutely. It definitely takes effort. But the more we practice this shift in thinking, the more resilient and adaptable we become. Which leads us to another important point the video makes, cultivating a growth mindset.
I've heard that term before, but I'm not sure I fully grasp it. Can you explain what it means?
A growth mindset is the belief that our abilities aren't fixed, but can be developed through effort, learning, and persistence. It's the opposite of a fixed mindset, which assumes that our talents and abilities are predetermined and can't be changed.
So, someone with a growth mindset sees challenges as opportunities to learn and grow, while someone with a fixed mindset might avoid challenges altogether because they're afraid of failing.
Exactly. And the great thing about a growth mindset is that it fosters a love of learning, a willingness to embrace challenges, and a resilience that allows us to bounce back from setbacks.
I get it. It's like seeing our brains as muscles that we can strengthen and develop over time through consistent effort and practice.
You got it. And the video highlights the fact that adopting a growth mindset can be incredibly transformative, not just for learning English, but for any new endeavor we take on.
This feels like a good place to pause and move on to the last part of our deep dive. We've talked about strategies for setting goals, building habits, finding support, embracing those missteps, and developing a growth mindset. What else is there to discover?
Well, we still need to explore some effective ways to stay motivated for the long haul, especially when that initial burst of enthusiasm starts to fade.
All right, we're back for the final stretch of our deep dive into new beginnings. We've covered a ton, from setting those clear goals to, not being afraid of making mistakes. But even when you have the right plan, staying motivated over time, that can feel like a whole other challenge.
Oh, it definitely is. That initial excitement, it tends to fade as the work kicks in, the video, it gets this, and it offers some great tips for keeping that motivation alive.
One that really resonated with me was about reconnecting with your why, that initial spark that got you started on this whole journey in the first place.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost in the day-to-day and forget about the big picture. Why did we want to, say, learn English? Was it to talk to family members who speak a different language? To travel the world more confidently? Or maybe to open up new job opportunities?
Going back to those core reasons can be so powerful. It's like refueling your motivation tank.
It is. It reminds you why you started and helps you stay focused on those long-term benefits, even when things get tough. And, the video also talks about finding inspiration along the way.
I like that idea. What if, instead of just focusing on how far we have to go, we actively looked for things that inspire us within the journey itself?
Think about learning English. Maybe you get inspired by discovering where words come from, their history, or by exploring the literature of different cultures.
Or even just connecting with people from all over the world and seeing how language can bridge those gaps.
Right, when we tap into those sources of inspiration, it brings a sense of joy and purpose to the journey, making it, I don't know, more sustainable and rewarding.
Definitely. The video also talks about the importance of celebrating those small wins along the way. It's so easy to get fixated on the end goal and miss the progress we're making step by step.
Yeah, we tend to think that only those big accomplishments are worth celebrating, but the truth is, it's those smaller victories, those moments of, aha, I get it now, that pave the way to mastery.
Like, instead of beating yourself up for not being fluent after just a month, maybe celebrate the fact that you can now introduce yourself or order a coffee in English.
Those seemingly small steps are actually huge. They build your confidence, reinforce that belief in yourself, and fuel your motivation to keep going.
Speaking of believing in ourselves, it's important to remember we're not alone in this. Every expert, every master of their craft started as a beginner.
Absolutely. The video reminds us that behind every impressive performance or accomplishment, there were hours and hours of practice, setbacks, and moments of doubt.
It's easy to look at someone who's fluent in another language or who's mastered a skill and think they must have some natural talent that we don't have, but that's just not true.
Everyone who's achieved mastery in anything has stumbled and failed along the way.
Yeah.
It's just part of the journey. The key is to embrace those challenges, learn from those mistakes, and keep moving forward.
Their success stories aren't about some magic formula or shortcut. It's about dedication, persistence, and a willingness to keep learning and growing even when it's tough.
And that's something everyone can do, regardless of where they're starting or what they think their limitations are.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a question. What's one small, concrete step you can take today to move closer to that new beginning you're dreaming of?
Maybe it's downloading a language learning app, signing up for that online course, or even just reaching out to a friend who shares your interests.
The key is you don't need to have all the answers or have it all figured out. You just got to start. The journey unfolds one step at a time.
And as you take those first steps, remember, every expert was once a beginner. The view from the top will be worth the climb.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into new beginnings. Remember, you're not alone on this journey, and the most important step is the one you take today.